Welcome back. I'm glad you're here. If you've been feeling unsettled lately, like something is shifting under the surface of your life, you're not alone. There's a quiet intensity in the air right now. And Scorpio, it's moving through you in ways that are difficult to name, but impossible to ignore. This isn't just about change. It's about depth. The kind that doesn't ask you to move forward quickly, but to pause and look inward. Because you're not in the same story anymore. The outer world may look the same, but something inside you knows. The narrative has shifted. The old explanations, the old roles, they don't quite fit. And what's coming next isn't just a new direction. It's a deeper reckoning, a return to something essential. In the next few minutes, we'll explore why this moment matters, what the current alignments are asking of you, and how you can meet them with honesty, strength, and clarity. We're not here to predict easy answers. We're here to understand the forces shaping you, so you can choose how to respond. Let's begin. The solar eclipse is now moving through your 12th house, the most hidden part of the chart. This is the space of the unconscious, of karmic endings, of dreams and shadows. And when an eclipse touches this part of your sky, it doesn't always bring clarity in obvious ways. Instead, it stirs the waters. It reveals what's been lingering beneath the surface, sometimes for years. You might notice an old fear rising, a thought you haven't had in a long time, a memory that feels more like a feeling than a fact. It could come through your dreams, through a silence that suddenly feels heavy, or through an interaction that makes you question something you've always believed about yourself. You may not understand it right away, but you'll feel it. Something is loosening its grip. This eclipse doesn't come to haunt you, it comes to help you release. It's not chaos for the sake of disruption. It's disruption in service of clarity. You might find yourself stepping away from a pattern, a habit, or even a relationship that no longer holds weight in the present moment. Not out of drama, not out of anger, but because you finally see it clearly. And that alone is enough. Scorpio, this is your chance to clear emotional residue that you've carried out of loyalty to your past. You don't need to explain it to anyone. You don't need to prove why it's time. You just need to honor the quiet part of you that knows the story has ended, even if the page hasn't fully turned. Let it end. Let the silence deepen, because in that space, your next chapter begins, not with a bang, but with a breath. And then Pluto awakens, quietly, but with unmistakable weight. As your ruling planet, Pluto doesn't knock gently. He dismantles. He purifies by fire. And now his presence is pressing into your third house, the part of your chart that governs the mind, internal narratives, communication, and the subtle assumptions that shape how you move through the world. Scorpio, this is not a surface level shift. This is a reckoning with your inner dialogue, the voice inside your head that narrates your life, often without question. And Pluto doesn't tolerate illusions, especially the ones you've built to keep yourself safe. If you've been telling yourself stories out of habit, out of fear, or out of shame, those stories are starting to unravel. It might come through a sudden realization that catches you off guard, through a conversation where you hear your own words and realize they no longer feel true, through a piece of writing, a memory, or even a silence that echoes back something you've been avoiding. Whatever form it takes, it will likely be subtle at first, but unmistakable in its effect. Because once Pluto reveals a lie, you can't unsee it. This is where something old begins to die, not in your life, but in your thinking. You may begin to challenge beliefs that once felt permanent, beliefs about who you are, what you're capable of, or how you're allowed to be seen and heard. You might notice yourself letting go of the need to be understood by everyone, because for the first time, you're starting to understand yourself. A new voice is emerging, one that is sharper, quieter, and more exacting. A voice that doesn't need to shout to be powerful. A voice that no longer apologizes for the depth of your truth. This is not about becoming louder. This is about becoming more honest. And in that honesty, Scorpio, you stop shrinking. You begin to take up the space that was always yours to claim. Now Saturn enters the frame, slow, unyielding, and exacting. This time he's moving through your fifth house, the space that holds your capacity for joy, for passion, for creative expression, and for the soft, often wounded voice of your inner child. But Saturn doesn't arrive with celebration or spontaneity. He brings structure, responsibility, and clarity that strips away anything built on fantasy or emotional evasion. This is not a punishment, it's a maturation, a call to examine the foundations of how you give and receive love. Scorpio, this is where you're being asked, do you love with conditions? Do you create with restraint? Do you censor your joy because the world once told you it was too much or not enough? Saturn brings a mirror, and it's an honest one. If you've sought validation over connection, performance over presence, or kept your most sacred parts hidden out of fear of being judged, that strategy is beginning to crack. The surface shine no longer satisfies. The applause doesn't quiet the ache. This is also a test of authenticity. You may find yourself confronting old romantic dynamics, relationships where you gave too much or held back entirely. You may revisit childhood wounds, not to dwell, but to finally speak to the part of you that was silenced, overlooked, or forced to grow up too soon. And in the creative realm, the question becomes, are you making something true or just something safe? Saturn invites you to begin again, not as a child craving approval, but as a sovereign being reclaiming joy on your own terms. To be the artist who creates from truth, not trend. To be the lover who stays soft, not because it's easy, but because it's rooted in self-respect. To parent yourself with the same protection and encouragement you may have longed for from others. This isn't about finding comfort, it's about earning integrity. The kind that only comes when you stop running from your own heart and begin to build a life that honors it. So ask yourself, what would it mean to be loyal to your joy, even when no one is watching? Because that's where Saturn will meet you, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet space where real courage is born. And just when the work feels heaviest, Jupiter arrives, not as a dramatic rescue, but as a gentle widening of space. The planet of growth and grace now turns his light toward your sixth house, the realm of your daily life, your work, your habits, your health, and in the systems you've built to hold yourself together. But this is not a loud breakthrough. It's quiet, practical, felt first in the body, then in the mind. You may begin to notice how drained you've become by certain tasks that no longer nourish you, how long you've been operating on autopilot, or how your body has been speaking in subtle ways through tension, fatigue, or a sudden need to slow down, trying to pull your attention inward. Jupiter doesn't remove the responsibilities, but he reframes them. He helps you see where efficiency has overtaken meaning and where you've been showing up out of obligation, not alignment. Now a new rhythm wants to emerge, one that doesn't demand perfection, but presence. A way of living that reclaims the sacredness of routine, where healing is not a weekend escape, but a daily practice, where rest is not a reward, but a birthright, and where even the most ordinary parts of your day can begin to carry quiet joy if you let them. This isn't about quitting everything or starting over. It's about micro decisions, taking the walk, saying no, eating slowly, reorganizing your day to include space for breath, choosing to listen to your energy instead of overriding it. Scorpio, this is where expansion happens, not in the future, but in the now. When you begin to realize that devotion to self isn't selfish, it's foundational. That a healthy life isn't one without stress, but one where you've stopped abandoning yourself in the name of productivity. Let Jupiter show you how spacious life can feel, not when everything is different, but when you start showing up differently. The light at the end of the tunnel isn't a destination, it's a choice made quietly, one moment at a time. And now, as this cycle nears its turning point, the lunar eclipse casts its shadow across your seventh house, the house of committed partnership, sacred mirrors, and the agreements you make with others. This is where the personal becomes relational, where your growth is tested not in isolation, but in connection. And during a lunar eclipse, something that's been hidden often comes into full view. For you, Scorpio, this may be a moment of reckoning in your relationships, romantic, professional, or deeply personal, not necessarily with drama or conflict, but with a kind of inner knowing that leaves no room for denial. You might feel a shift in how you relate to someone who's been close to you, a subtle pulling away, or a deepening that takes you by surprise. A conversation you've avoided may finally rise to the surface, or a quiet truth you've been sitting with may now ask to be lived out loud. This isn't about loss for the sake of it. It's about recognizing where your attachments have been entangled with fear, obligation, or outdated versions of yourself. You may find that you're no longer willing to maintain a connection that requires you to shrink, or you may realize that someone in your life is now meeting you where you truly are. Not who you're, not who they hoped you'd be, but exactly who you've become. Eclipses close doors that were already loosening at the hinges. They clear space, not with cruelty, but with precision. And this one reminds you, true connection can only grow from truth. Love that asks you to betray yourself is not love. It's a contract. And Scorpio, you've outgrown contracts written from fear. If someone leaves, now let them go with grace. If someone appears, meet them from the center of your wholeness. And if no one else moves but you, know that that too is enough. Because the relationship that defines this eclipse isn't just the one you have with another. It's the one you're finally restoring with yourself. Scorpio, this isn't just a shift. It's not simply a new chapter or a passing moment of growth. What you're stepping into now is something far more elemental. It's a soul return, a homecoming to the parts of you that were once silenced, buried, or distorted in the name of survival. For a long time, you've carried the weight of what others needed you to be. You became strong because life demanded it. You became secretive because the world didn't feel safe enough to hold your truth. You learned to endure, to shapeshift, to read between the lines, not because you wanted to, but because you had to. That survival gave you power, but now that old armor is no longer your home. This moment invites you to lay it down, not because you're weak, but because you're ready to live without the constant alertness of defense, to stop performing resilience and start embodying your own softness, your depth, your clarity. You're not losing your edge, you're refining it, honing it into something intentional, sovereign. You are being called back to your own essence. Not the version of you that adapted to circumstances, but the one that existed before the wound, before the mask, before the world told you who you had to be safe or loved. So let the old story end. Let it fall away with quiet reverence. You don't need to explain your transformation to anyone. You don't need to justify your distance, your silence, your softness, or your strength. What is real will stay. What was never real will dissolve. What's rising in its place isn't certainty, because Scorpio doesn't move in straight lines. What's rising is presence, power, alignment, and the kind of freedom that only comes when you choose yourself without hesitation or apology. And so, Scorpio, as we bring this journey to a close, I want you to take a breath, not a rushed one, not a breath to move on, but a breath that honors everything you've just moved through. This season isn't about answers tied up in neat conclusions. It's about learning to stand inside the unknown without losing your center, to feel the ground shifting and still say, I trust myself here. You've been walking through a kind of inner eclipse, not just in the sky, but in the soul. Old patterns falling away, old truths dissolving. And what remains isn't emptiness, it's space, sacred space, for you to build something real, something rooted, something that reflects not who you've had to be, but who you choose to become. Let yourself be changed by this, quietly, steadily, without the need to prove anything. And remember, no matter who stays, no matter who leaves, no matter what is revealed, you are already whole. Until next time, keep listening inward, keep honoring what's real, and above all, keep returning to the version of you that no longer needs to be hidden. That's the one the universe has been waiting for.